much. Let's place this here. All right. Hi, good morning, everyone. Oh, perfect. So we're going to talk about my favorite topic, which is draw your feelings. And I'm going to talk about it from the perspective of having trust in myself. And this topic of trust is so big. What does it mean? What does trust mean? It gets thrown around everywhere. Trusting teams, trusting our communities. But I also want to get a little personal. What does it mean to trust ourselves? And I really believe that the heart of all creativity, of anything that we do, is self-trust. Because if I can't trust my own voice, how can I create anything? And so I want to begin by introducing you to Rukmini of 30 years ago, give or take. And yes, she is very cute. Not much has changed, really, besides replacing the bottle with a pencil and a copy of my book. Basically the same. But the reason I also introduce myself this way is that I want to tell you the story of this little girl and how she began to trust her own voice. So it's another picture of me. I was a shy kid. I grew up in a conservative Indian family in North Florida. And I didn't have the greatest confidence in myself. I was used to playing small, not raising my voice, not really having any space for my own opinions. Most of the time, I felt like this. I had a rich imagination, a rich inner life. I had so much in me. Thoughts, emotions, it was just all here. I had my dreams, I had my faith, I had the people that loved me, I had the ways that I felt hurt. It was in me, and I didn't really know how to get it out of me. Can anyone here relate with this image? Does anyone? Okay, wow, yeah. I'm not alone in this, and you aren't either. And I believe this is a very personal type of pain. This is an intimate pain that we know really well of an unexpressed life. And thank God I had art. So I did have an outlet. And for me, it was the pages of my sketchbook. This is where I would express myself, where I learned to tap into that voice, that creative voice in me. And I would draw pictures in high school and college. Interestingly enough, if you look at this, my work hasn't changed too much. If you know what I draw, it's a lot about what's happening in my mind and my heart, taking what's inside and bringing it out. And so I want to pause here for a second and talk a little bit about self-trust. Where does it come from, and when does it go away? Because I believe that all kids are super authentic. They trust themselves, but it's something happens in adolescence and adulthood where we sort of lose that inner trust, that voice. And so I believe there's many ways that we lose ourselves, that we lose that sense of trust. It happens when I say something I don't mean, when I say yes, but I really mean hell no. That's one way. It happens when I disrespect my own personal boundaries and I do something I'm uncomfortable with, or I let someone do something that I'm uncomfortable with, whether that's in a relationship or in work or in a community. This one really hits home for me. When I make myself smaller than I am. Ooh, can anyone relate with that? Yeah, especially as a woman of color, as a child of immigrants, this is a familiar one. When I try to prove my worth for someone else, when I'm running after someone else's love or validation, it doesn't always feel good. Actually, it rarely feels good. There's something in me that feels heavy and bitter. And I just want to take a second if this really hits home for anyone, because this is something that is deeply personal and very, very universal. This is the pain of abandoning ourselves. It's the pain. It happens in small moments. It happens in large moments. It can be day to day. And also, it's not bad. This is very human. This is very, very human to go through this experience. But sometimes it's helpful to know where it's coming from. So, usually this is how I feel after that. You can call it the inner critic, you can call it the inner gremlin, but usually by repetitively ignoring my own needs, losing myself, not trusting myself, it amplifies the voice of the inner critic, which is this little guy that's here. Does anyone else have an inner critic that seems to follow them around all day? Oh yeah, yes. Mine is here right now. Like as I'm talking to you, it's whispering in my ear, like, stop it. So yeah, that's the inner critic. And that's something that we all live with, but sometimes it gets louder than what we want. Sometimes it can be really unbearable. And like we saw, it's not foreign to us. So I want to share a little bit about where do we go from here? Where did I go from here? So for me, it got to a point where I wanted to step out of it, where I declared, hell no. And so this is a true story. I was in the midst of a relationship. I felt like I was losing myself in many ways, and I just felt this frustration. And I remember sitting down at my desk, getting out my paints and my paper, and I literally wrote this to myself like a personal declaration. I will not lose myself to anger. I will not lose myself to insecurity or competition or fear or infatuation. And I sure as hell won't lose myself for another person's approval or validation. I won't even lose myself to love, which you may or may not agree with me. I may give myself to love, which is a different thing than losing. But for me, this is important, and I feel like a lot of us go through this. This is the first step to reclaiming ourselves, is to notice the ways that, wow, where do I play small? Where do I cross my own boundaries? Where do I break the promises I make to myself? And when does it get so bad that I can make this declaration? And this happens in a lot of ways. And I want to share from what happened after this. So after making this, I came across something called the 100-Day Project. Is anyone here familiar or heard of the 100-Day Project? Okay, cool. I see some hands up. For those who aren't familiar, it's as simple as it seems. It's doing something every day for 100 days. I believe this project has been around for a while, but it got really popular about 8-9 years ago as an online global art movement. And I came across this just as I was graduating college. And I really felt that even though I'm graduating from design school, I had a creative experience, I still didn't feel like that inside me, like that picture earlier where I had so much to say, it still wasn't being expressed. And so I thought, okay, let's give this a shot, let's try this. And mind you, I'm not a consistent person. Like, I'm really not. I struggle in so many ways to do things consistently. And somehow this felt important. It felt important to try to stick to a promise to myself. And so I did it, and I decided to draw my own feelings. And we'll see where that went. So I coined this term obscure emotions in 2016, and I just took a ballpoint pen, pink ink, and my sketchbook that would fit neatly in my purse so I could literally take it with me wherever I went. And I just started drawing pictures that represented how I felt, whether it was the feeling of wanting to connect in a conversation, the feeling of being very sensitive in a world that wants me to be very hard. I would make drawings about what it feels like to be limited, what it feels like to be lonely, what it feels like to pretend to be confident when I'm really feeling a lot of doubt. And something really amazing happened. on my little Instagram account of like 300 people, I started getting really sweet and personal comments. And I started getting comments like, I have always felt this way and I never had words for it. Thank you so much. And so many like that. And I had this realization that even though I'm sharing something so personal, it's still universal. And so I began to keep that with me, that what is most personal is most universal. And art can be a medium for connection, for healing, for sharing something that we don't often talk about, but are so desperately wanting to express. And this project really took on a life of its own. I had no expectation of it, but after doing 100 days, I self-published a small book. I had an opportunity to share it and exhibit it in New York City in an art show, which was beautiful, all the original drawings. Later on, a few years later, I created a card deck. At one point, it was an online advice column where people would send me how they're feeling and I would draw it for them, which was a lot of fun. And the most amazing thing is that I feel like I found myself in this. I feel like it started with the seed of trusting myself, of committing to myself, of asking, can I rely on my own self? Can I depend on myself? And just that question is so important. I feel like it's the foundation of all healing and creativity. Am I my own advocate? And that was so important for me. It was like a domino effect. I said yes to the 100-day project, and it was this domino effect of creativity that came. But really, what I said yes to was myself. And I think that's my biggest takeaway. So it was so powerful that afterwards, I promised myself that I would do this 100-day project every single year to whatever my capacity. Some years, it took me 300 days. Some years, it wasn't quite finished. But the idea is that I was saying yes to myself. And you can see here, it's just a little snapshot of all the different projects. 2024 isn't even on there and others, but I would use it as a way to explore things that were important to me, whether it was drawing the Enneagram for 100 days, or drawing parts of myself, mapping my heart, practicing digital drawing. It was a way for me to consistently show up, and I felt that every year my voice got stronger in it. But really, it comes back to staying true and trusting myself. So, and with that, it continued to snowball. So what happened was that these projects led to something way bigger than me. And in 2020, during the pandemic, I started these online Zoom workshops, because remember, everything was on Zoom, and they were super beautiful. I would bring people together and we would draw our feelings. But interestingly enough, it wasn't about drawing. It wasn't a drawing class. It was like a connection group where we would talk about things that were hard to talk about in words. And it continued to grow. So we'll jump 4 years later. This was a beautiful heart mapping workshop I did last year, and we had over 400 people on Zoom at once from all over the world, literally drawing their hearts. It was so beautiful. It was like really seeing humanity come alive at that moment. And here's a little snapshot, just a small little bit of the hundreds of heart maps that have been created. And it just felt incredible to see this, again, this domino effect. And it all started in this one place of me saying yes to myself. Me trusting myself led to my projects, led to drawing your feelings, which led to that book right over there as well. So it was really special. It was really beautiful. And I want to also pause here because this is my story about where saying yes had led me to. But I also want to give you the experience of what it's like to draw your feelings and the experience of telling your story visually. So this is the place where we pause, and you might have noticed a paper and a marker on your chair. Just take a second to grab that. And so I feel like I've done enough talking. I want to see what we can all create together and collaboratively. So on your sheet of paper, you're going to draw a small stick figure or some kind of figure on one side and a larger one on the other. So one represents younger you, the other one is present you. So we'll just take 10 seconds or so to draw that out, however it is, whether it's a little blob or a stick figure. If anyone needs more markers, just let us know. We have some volunteers with markers and papers. Okay. Does anyone need 5 more seconds? Yeah, see if you can borrow another color from a friend. Otherwise, we have some markers over here. I know yellow is not the easiest on white paper. Okay, once you've drawn your 2 figures, what we're going to do is we are going to connect them with a line that represents your life. Very easy, right? So this is called the messy middle. This is a representation of what your life, what trusting yourself has looked like in your life. The messy, beautiful, nonlinear journey to growth is what I call it. So if we want, we can just let's take 5 seconds to simply close your eyes, get present in your body, and imagine that if you were to draw your life like a line, what would it look like if you were to see your life unfold in the simplest way? What would that look like? So you can open your eyes, and I'm going to show you how you can draw your feelings in 30 seconds or less, because that's what we're going to do. So quickly put that line on paper. You might want to overthink it, but don't do that. Just trust your gut. Draw whatever comes to you. Again, we're taking the most complicated thing, which is life, and drawing it as a simple line. So if I had music, I would play it, but let's do another 10 more seconds. Again, this might stress you out a little bit. That's okay. I know it's asking a lot, but draw that line. And does anyone else need 5 more seconds? Okay, wow, you guys are great. So the best part of this is turn to a neighbor and show them the story of your line and share it. So we'll have a couple minutes. We'll do 1 minute, and then we'll switch for the other minute. Have fun with this. Okay, we'll do 1 more minute. 1 more minute. Okay, we'll begin to wrap it up. Just take 10 more seconds. Okay. All right, raise your hand if you can hear me. We'll do raise your hand if you can hear. Almost. Raise your hand if you can hear me. Oh, amazing. Thank you guys so much. I mean, honestly, I didn't want to stop it. It was so great to see this explosion of connection and conversation. Beautiful. Love the energy. Does anyone, before I move on, does anyone want to share anything from that really quick experiment? Anything that came up for you? Anything that was interesting? Yeah.
We were just talking. Here, you please jump in. Oh, sorry. We were just talking and we were jumping in and we were making some similarities between our lines where we noticed we started out really kind of smoothly. And then as it got towards the big me, now in the future, the lines started curving and circling and moving in a lot of more directions.
Thank you so much for that. It's really interesting seeing the similarities and seeing how much can be expressed with a single line. I find that quite fascinating. Anyone else before we move forward? Any interesting? Yes, someone in the back.
I really struggled to draw current me because I felt the inner critic showing up, like, oh, that's not accurate, like more feeling like it needed to be realistic, whereas the younger me looks more ideal, like a little child.
Thank you. That I so relate. I often tell people that if you want to meet your inner critic, pick up a pencil and look at a blank sheet of paper, because it's crazy like what will come up for us and how difficult it feels to represent ourselves. So thank you for sharing. I think that's a really honest experience, that even in a simple exercise, it can be a bit challenging. So, okay, why did I do that? Why did we stop here? Well, one is to experience what it's like to put our life on paper, to experience how simple it can be and how quick to draw our feelings, and for you to get even a moment to reflect on your own story. And so I'm going to take a second to bring it back to what we were talking about losing our trust in ourselves, about feeling that sense of self-abandonment, and then stepping into keeping a promise to ourselves. And so I want to come back to this idea of returning to ourselves. Remember how painful it was to lose ourselves, that universal pain. Again, it's human. It happens almost on a day-to-day basis. Yet, there is so much beauty in returning to ourselves. That is the beauty of being human, that no matter how often we feel like we're losing ourselves, we feel like we're abandoning ourselves, we're breaking promises to ourselves, we can always, always come back. And so these are 3 ways that I do it. And one is by valuing and protecting my space, my boundaries, knowing my capacity, saying no when I really mean it. Another is keeping promises to myself. That was such a big one in my own journey. And again, it doesn't have to be every promise. Like, I do not keep every promise to myself. That's hard. But you just need one. You just need one that you can keep and show up consistently to give yourself that evidence that I can do this. And then trusting my gut intuition. Our body is so wise that the minute I'm saying yes to something, my body, again, is pulling me back, saying, no way, you do not have capacity, you can't do that. Being able to listen to the wisdom of the body is one of the greatest gifts that we have. It knows, we know what we want, we know what we need. How can we just tap into that more? And when we can do this, when we can return to ourselves, it feels a little bit like this. So this is what we're after, the sense that I respect and love and trust myself. I'm there for myself, because having this is the foundation of everything. It's behind every creative act. It is what is really healing and needed in this world. And it starts with small steps, like that domino effect. Where can I say yes to and follow through on that? So I want to just end there, and thank you so much for your attention today.